Hello, my name is Tanya Ní Mhuirthile and I am an assistant professor at the School of Law and Government in DCU. I'm an academic lawyer and my research interests are in law's interaction with the human body. And I like to use my research to support activists to help them to develop their advocacy strategies. And I also use my research to support and advise governments on the development of law and policy and companies to help them to develop their diversity and inclusion policies. And I give presentations just like this one at various people's workplaces. So I've been invited here today to talk to you about the plus that comes after LGBTI. And so here you have it in the top left-hand corner of the slide. LGBTI disaggregated all the different letters for all the new words that have emerged in recent times. And so it's quite an alphabet soup, as you can see. And it basically boils down to lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, transgender, transsexual, transvestite, transitioning, intersex, queer, questioning, agender, asexual, aromantic, androgynous, non-binary, two-spirit, demi, semi-romantic. So there's loads of different things going on in that particular alphabet soup, but we can kind of organize them or categorize them in 4 ways. And this is where the genderbread person comes in. So what we have going on here are questions relating to identity. Who are you? Who do you believe yourself to be? Who do you feel yourself to be? Questions in relation to orientation. To whom are you attracted? Sexually and romantically, and those two things might not necessarily match up. What's your biology like? What's your sex? How do your sex characteristics align? Are you male? Are you female? Are you somewhere in between? But the big one is in relation to expression. How do you express your gender identity? And how do other people read that expression? And the way that you're treated and you get on with in the world can vary depending on how people read your expression. And that's really the thing, I suppose, that brings these 4 different ideas together, is that they all challenge normative understandings of what it means to be a person in the world. In other words, they all challenge the dominance of heterosexuality. And so I'd like for a moment, if I can, to talk about the experience of intersex people. I know that one of the other speakers will be talking about trans people later on, but intersex is an umbrella term for a variety of bodily configurations where a person's sex characteristics do not align along male and female lines. And there's nothing inherently unhealthy in intersex bodies, they're just differently organized. And since the 20th century, medicine has intervened with hormones and surgeries to reshape and to resculpt intersex bodies along more apparently male or female lines. And that has come at a cost for intersex people. A physical cost in terms of the need for repeat surgeries, build-up of scar tissue, chronic pain, lack of sexual sensation, necrosis, which is potential rotting of the flesh, but also psychological consequences such as trauma, inability to maintain relationships or intimate relationships, and stress and impaired mental health. This process of undergoing medicalization for intersex, particularly when done without the consent of the intersex person, is considered by the UN to be analogous to female genital mutilation and is called intersex genital mutilation. And so I'd like to talk a bit about gender in sport. And in particular, to talk about when intersex first became an issue in the sporting context, and that was in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. And you can see on the slide there the 2 athletes, Stella Walsh and Helen Stevens. They were both on the American track team, both raced in the 100-meter sprint, and Walsh won at quite a speed. And so Stevens challenged her ability to participate, claiming that she was in fact a man. And so Walsh had to undergo very invasive gynecological tests to prove her femininity. And these kinds of questions about sport and real women and men hiding kept going throughout the 40s, 50s and 60s. The Russians in particular took quite a lot of flack for having athletes on their women's team who was alleged were tucking in a way that would make RuPaul proud. And so in 1966, the gender verification test was introduced. And it was very simple initially. It involved a naked parade of all female athletes past a judging panel who had a good look to make sure that the athletes were in fact women. And the only person to be exempt from this was Princess Anne when she competed in the Montreal Olympics in 1976. Over time, the test evolved and it became a DNA test, a smear test looking at chromosomes, looking at gonads, various different things. But also over time, to every athlete, only to those whose expression or presentation raised questions as to whether they were really women. And so this is where we see our gender expression thing coming in again. The poster person for this right now is Caster Semenya, and a year ago in 2019, she challenged and lost her case before the Court of Arbitration in Sport, challenging a finding that if she wants to compete in the mid-distance races, at which she is superb, she will have to take hormone suppressant drugs in order to enable her to participate, to level the playing field with the other athletes. And that's completely antithetical to the normal approach of sporting organisations to drugs. But more importantly, Semenya is doing nothing wrong. She's not taking anything to enhance her position and her ability. And we don't do these kinds of interventions for other athletes. So no one has ever suggested we chop Michael Phelps' hands off because he has abnormally long arms to level the playing field or indeed the swimming pool in relation to the other swimmers that he's competing against. More importantly, though, what this means is that this ruling could coerce Semenya back into the medical management model of Intersex that we talked about on the last slide, with all the potential risk that that brings to her. And so when we're thinking about LGBTI inclusion in sport, I think we need to think about inclusion first. We need to ensure that because sport can bring so many benefits for so many people. And if we look at the recent LGBT Lives in Ireland report, we see that over 70% of Irish trans people have attempted suicide at some point in their lives. So to be denied access to something that might help someone manage a potential challenge is huge. And I think that, the athletes, those people who go on to compete in the Olympics, are very rare birds indeed. They're certainly not normal by any stretch of the imagination. Any of them, they are extraordinary people. For all the rest of us who are ordinary, I think we need, when developing these policies, to do so in a way that enables the maximum number of people to gain the maximum benefit out of their participation in sport, so that they can live the best lives that they can. So that's all that I'd like to say. And here are my contact details. If you have any questions at all, I'm very happy to answer them, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the seminar. Thanks very much.